Hi there, Angelo John Lewis for the Sacred Inclusion Network. And if you'd like to know more about us, please visit our website, sacredinclusion.com. And here today, I'm here with Dr. Joan Walton. And because I think that what she is doing is very important, and I think that you listeners should know something about her, I want to read to you a bit from her bio. Dr. Joan Walton is a senior lecturer at York St. John University, and she's a leading voice exploring the connections between consciousness, spirituality, and education. She holds a PhD in these areas, and her work challenges the purely materialist viewpoint that many people have about the brain. Among other things, she's a chair of the executive committee for the International Network of the Study of Spirituality and a director of the Galileo Commission and the Scientific and Medical Network. She's at the forefront of international research and dialogue investigating consciousness from a scientific, philosophical, and spiritual perspectives, and a pioneer approaches to consciousness education. Joan, did I make any mistakes? Did I get it? Did I get most of it right?
That's just fine. it's, it's good. There's lots of long words in there and lots of different positions, but it's good.
Just to ground us a little bit, let's tell me where you are and what you're doing at this current moment. I know you're at some conference.
Oh yeah, I'm at the Science of Consciousness conference in Barcelona in Spain. This is a conference that's held annually. Every 2 years, it's held in Tucson in America, and then on the years in between, it's held somewhere in Europe. The venue changes. I've been coming. I came to the second conference in 1995, and then the 20th one in 2014, and then I've been to this conference the last 2 or 3 years. So it's where people with an interest in consciousness from all over the world gather together and do presentations, concurrent sessions, small groups, etc. So it's a wonderful opportunity to meet others with shared interests and chat and have meals together. It's a very exciting, energetic atmosphere.
And this gives you listener some idea of Dr. Joan and where she's coming from. So let me attempt to start from the beginning because I always think it's important or useful anyway to know a little bit about a person's personal journey. You were not always doing this. Tell me a little bit about how you got involved in consciousness stuff and consciousness research. Anywhere you
Well,
start from.
I have actually been interested in consciousness as a phenomenon since my late teens. So you asked me how I came to start. It just came from my professional practice, actually. So when I left school, I went straight into residential social work. I started looking after children in the care system. And I had come from a pretty secure, strict, but a secure and loving home. So I was thrown into the depths of the suffering of young children who came from deprived, dysfunctional backgrounds, and and they were just traumatized. And I, in a sense, then developed, if you like, secondary trauma through experiencing their trauma. I too became traumatized, and this question, uh, how is it possible to have a world where so much suffering is possible? And so I kind of went on and became a professional social worker, thinking if I become qualified, I can help these children better. And I realized as I became a social worker that actually it's like putting a tiny plaster on a huge gaping wound that needed major surgery. So at first I thought, so we need to address the social and political structures that we're in order to create a better world for children and young people. And then realized that actually, because of the whole social structure, the whole power system, the egos of the people who were in power, that system wasn't going to change easily either. And that what we needed was a shift in consciousness. So we needed to have a shift in our understanding of consciousness, and we needed to have a shift in how we experience consciousness ourselves. So that was actually the start of my interest in consciousness, just coming from my own life experiences of consciousness itself.
So I want to ask you about a particular slice in your life, which probably, perhaps preceded before you were doing the work that you're doing. I know at one time from reading that you spent some time with Mother Teresa Children's Home in Calcutta. How did that shape your experience and perspective on the things that we're talking about?
Well, it kind of added to what I've just said because I spent a year in India and Southeast Asia. About 3 months in Mother Teresa's homes, and again, she and the sisters whom she worked with were working with the the most deeply deprived children. In fact, the children's home itself, or where the children were living, were on the second floor of an old ICI building, and ICI is a British company, an old British company, and it was called Prem Dam. They'd gifted it to Mother Teresa, which means a gift of love. And on the bottom floor was basically a hospice, people kind of dying, older people, and on the first floor there was this room where it just had lines of beds and cots, and children spent most of the day in those cots. And the sisters basically took children who were dying from the street and brought them to this place and just took them through a kind of physical routine of getting up, having a breakfast of an egg, rice, some green veg. And the aim was to get them physically well enough again to put them back on the streets. And volunteers like myself and other people who came, our role was really to give them the kind of social and emotional care that the sisters didn't really have time to give them. And that was a salutary experience also. So, for example, during that time, there was an 18-month-old girl who was just lying prone in a cot all day, every day. And I guess I just took a kind of attachment to her, and through the time I was there would play with her, would bring her out, and just watching the amount of progress that she made in those kind of 3 months was phenomenal, and made me realize just how important the social and emotional dimensions of life are. It's not just enough to have emotional care, but to have social and emotional and spiritual care, obviously, because there was a kind of spiritual dimension to that also. So yeah, this was just another aspect of learning about what it means to be human, what it means to experience consciousness, and all these different dimensions of consciousness.
Now, a lot of your work has to do with challenging the materialist aspect of science, and in particular, the study of the brain. So, I guess for people that are new to this, maybe you could just give me like a quick understanding of what you mean by post-materialism and how it relates to the study of consciousness.
Okay. Well, the dominant assumption in mainstream society is that the brain creates consciousness, and that when the brain dies, consciousness dies also. That is the kind of belief, and actually, this is why people say, what's so significant about consciousness? Because they relate it to the brain, and the people who are interested in the brain are scientists, neuroscientists, and to a certain extent philosophers, but not anybody else. And the post-material, and so that's the basis of a materialist understanding of the world. Matter is the foundational reality, the foundational constituent of reality. Uh, Everything started with the Big Bang. Then you get the kind of evolutionary process through which matter evolves, and eventually, at a later stage of evolution, consciousness emerges from the brain. And so consciousness comes at a late stage of the evolutionary process. So that's materialism, where matter is foundational. But when you start questioning that, when you start saying, actually, does consciousness really just exist in the brain? Is it confined to the brain? Perhaps it's possible that consciousness exists beyond the brain. And it's even possible that it might be consciousness that's foundational and not matter. And it may be possible that the relationship between consciousness and matter is far more complex than the materialist view would have us believe. And if consciousness plays a more fundamental role, then that opens up all kinds of possibilities about what it means to be human, about forms of reality that exist beyond this embodied one. The exploration then becomes endless.
I'm going to ask a really simple question. It kind of astounds me, not being in this field, that there are people that actually believe that matter is primary. But is that really still the dominant sort of paradigm? It does seem to be changing a little bit, doesn't it?
Well, it is changing. There are more people believing that, but if yeah, most of our institutions, the way we see the world, the way that so my subject is education, and the way that in schools, for example, the emphasis is on testing to the limit. The emphasis is on external measurable targets. If children, when they're younger, out of their imagination, they kind of perceive something in another reality, or if they have an imaginary friend, or if they see something that's not physical, they get told off. Or there's so many stories about people, children who've been given medication because that they're having these illusions that are not healthy, because the general assumption is that matter is primary. So very often it's an unconscious assumption. And when you start exploring it in depth and you look at where the beliefs and the policies and our legal system, all of those are based on an implicit assumption that we are material beings
Mm.
rather than the fact that we are spiritual beings on a human journey.
Well, let's take it from there, and I'll ask you another simple question. Maybe it's not so simple, but what does all this have to do with spirituality?
Okay, right. Well, you're very much getting my view on this,
Oh,
and it's not a simple question. But I was part of a group of people who met once a month for 2.5 years, exploring the relationship between spirituality and consciousness. And then we did a webinar where 7 of us shared our different views. So if you were interested, I could give you the link to that webinar so that those of you in the audience who were interested in that whole presentation could have access to and could listen to those 7 different views. My own particular take on that is that, and I'm going to use probably 2 of the more difficult words in the English language, ontology and epistemology here. I'll explain them in a minute. But just to summarize, I'm saying that consciousness is ontology and spirituality is epistemology. Now, ontology, for those who are not completely familiar with those terms, is our beliefs about the nature of reality. What do we believe about the nature of being? So the belief that the world has a material basis is an ontology. The belief that the world where consciousness is foundational has an ontology. And if you go into religions, the belief that there's a God who exists independently of human beings, that's an ontology. That is a kind of theory, a way of understanding reality that we adhere to. Whereas an epistemology is how we come to know that reality. What are the means of knowing that reality? So in a materialist worldview, it's the scientific approach, and it's developing a hypothesis, and it's doing experiments and having a control group and then testing that hypothesis and coming to predictable and generalizable results. If you're taking, for example, an extreme fundamentalist Christian approach, the knowledge comes from the Bible. God has transmitted the truth via the Bible, and if you want to know about that nature of reality, you read the Bible. So that's different. That's what we mean by epistemology. So when I say ontology, my ontology is consciousness. Consciousness is my ontology. What I'm saying is what I've said before. Is my view is that consciousness is foundational. And how I explain that is that consciousness is infinite, it's eternal, it has the core qualities of love and creativity, and it has intelligence. And some people might call that God. I avoid the use of the term God because people mean different things by it and interpret different things through it. But I see that's how I understand the ultimate nature of reality, and that we as human beings are really that infinite eternal reality seeking to express itself in a different form. So it's this ultimate ground of being seeking to express itself purely in a different form. So if we are a pure expression of that ontology, we would be manifesting pure love with each other, and we have free will to create the kind of reality that we want to create. So that's my ontology. My epistemology, saying spirituality is my epistemology, is how we come to know that reality. And that can be in a variety of ways. So it can be through the more obvious ways of meditation, prayer, contemplation, the kind of practices that people relate to either religious or spiritual ways of understanding the world. But there are many other ways. So one that many people share is being in nature. You go out in nature and you feel this connection to this wider reality, and very often can feel a sense of awe, of wonder, and just feeling at one with the universe, and can feel that sense of love that's inherent in the universe. Or many people get it through gardening, taking care of plants and flowers, and others. And I think you can have that kind of spiritual experience, that connection, just through being with very young children. I believe that young children have a lot to teach us. So if you're with a very young child and just looking into the eyes of that child, there's something that comes from that child that is pure and innocent, and I think is expressing that foundational reality of love. And yeah, so that's my my explanation of the relationship between consciousness and spirituality.
It's a very, very good explanation, and it kind of begs the question, or impels me to ask you, what is your epistemology? Um, how do you access what you're talking about?
Yeah, a number of ways. Being in nature is very important. Being in nature, being in a place of stillness and quietness, and then a form of meditation, just going within and seeking to connect with that reality in that stillness and that quiet, and just staying there for extended periods of time. I think the other way for me is through music. Actually, there is some music that just takes me into other dimensions, and that to me is connecting me with a wider reality also.
So forgive me for my ignorance, but lots of people that read about these things talk about quantum physics, and I don't understand what it is at all. Um, but I wonder if you could make, make an attempt to briefly explain what that is, and then connect it with spirituality.
Okay. Nobody understands quantum physics, really. I think that's an important starting point.
Thank you.
And one theoretical physicist, one of the leading edge quantum physicists, I can't remember which one, I should do, said, if you think you understand quantum physics, you really haven't understood it at all. So I think that should be quite reassuring for you, Angelo. We're in good company.
Thank you.
Understanding it. I think what it does is it challenges certainty. So if you have the Newtonian materialist view of the world, and you go back to what I said earlier on, and you have the Big Bang, and the belief by Newtonian, by classical physics, is that there were laws inbuilt into the origin of the universe, and that those laws determine everything that has happened since then. And if we can discover those laws, we can predict what will happen in the future. So that's a very materialist, determinist view of the world. And that view of the world would say that even our conversation today was determined by that, the initial creation or laws inbuilt into the initial creation of the world. And it says that once you get the theory of everything, we're going to be able to predict and control the whole of our future. It is predetermined. It is certain. And people can feel secure with certainty, so that it makes people feel a bit safe to have feeling a predictable, secure knowable world, and so often there's not a lot of wish to challenge that. It can be reassuring. Quantum physics turns that all on its head. It basically says that the world is uncertain, that everything is interconnected. It does not subscribe to the belief that laws inbuilt into the creation of the universe predict everything that happens. And uh, if you've come across the kind of wave particle duality, does that concept mean anything at all to you? What it basically is saying is that something can be a wave or a particle and can change at any point in time, and that the role in traditional science and classical physics, if I am a researcher, then I can exist independently of that which I'm researching. So I can do a study and my presence doesn't affect it. Whereas in quantum physics, it's saying the researcher influences the outcome of the research. You cannot separate the researcher and research, the observer and the observed. And I think, just to give an example of that, very often in a school situation, when you get an inspector or someone coming in to observe what's going on in the classroom, and the children are facing the teacher or whatever, the person who's going to observe thinks they can creep into the door at the back and that they can just stay there and observe, and that they won't influence what goes on at all. But actually, once people will sense that there's someone else there, and it immediately changes their perception of what's going on. It affects their minds, and then it'll affect how they behave, and to a greater or lesser extent. So that's the fundamental principle of quantum physics, is the uncertainty.
So I'm going to attempt to ask you maybe a challenging question. Maybe it won't be challenging because you talk about these things all the time, or often. We've talked about the sort of the dangers of the materialist, ontological, and what's the other one? Um,
Epistemological?
yes. So
Epistemology.
we know what that looks like on the extreme. It can look like certain fundamentalist Christian perspectives, for example. What would be the sort of, like, I'll say it, the dangers of the opposite point of view, the opposite point of view that talks about what we call I'll just, for the lack of a better word, spiritual ontology and epistemology.
When I'm from where I'm coming from,
Sure, that's what I'm talking to.
no dangers, Angelo. No dangers. Well, because it's coming from a principle of we're all interconnected, we're all of equal value. So some of the principles coming from that are, if one person is not free, no one is free. It has inherent in it compassion, pure love.
Mhm.
Yeah, it people who come to this viewpoint, and very often, they come to it from a spiritual awakening themselves.
Mhm.
And in fact, there is an edited book, again, I can give you the link, which is uh, spiritual awakenings of scientists and academics, where people tell their stories of how they came to this very different way of understanding the world. And very often it comes through some kind of mystical experiences that enable people to say, hang on, there is much more to reality. And I would say always, I haven't come across a time where someone shifted to that worldview and has become less compassionate. It changes people in the direction of valuing nature, valuing the planet, valuing other people, changing their lives and the way they live and their attitudes to other people. And everybody always says, there's always improvement. We're not perfect. We're not doing things perfectly, but there's a kind of motivation, a way of seeing things that shifts in that kind of direction. And in principle, if you have that kind of worldview, uh, you don't do harm to anyone or anything else, because if you do, you're harming yourself.
Mhm.
That's the basic principle. Harm another, you harm yourself.
So I know, Joan, we haven't talked about well, I should mention to the people that on July 19th, 2025 at 11 a.m. Eastern Standard Time, which I believe is 3 o'clock British time. The time zone changes, but look it up in any event. Joan is going to be leading us in an exploration that we're calling Integrating Mind and Spirit, a Journey into Consciousness. And I'll put the information about that along with some of the other links that Dr. Walton has talked about in the show notes. And I know, Joan, we haven't really talked about what exactly we're going to be doing on this event, and we're going to discuss that shortly. But what would be your best outcome that people that take the time on a Saturday morning, what would you like them to gather from our experience together?
Well, I would like people to get the opportunity to discuss some of these things. I mean, I'm quite sure that some of your listeners will have had spiritual experiences themselves. Many may have had experiences that they've not had the opportunity to share with others. They think that they're the only one. It's amazing how often we find that happening. And so, what we're trying to do is to create communities where people can come and share those stories and not be judged, and realize that actually what the experience is valid and is similar. It can share it with others who've had similar kind of experiences. Even if people have not had those experiences, just having the opportunity to talk with others about some of the ideas that I've been talking about. So it might be that I just share some of the ideas, and then people will get the opportunity to discuss amongst themselves before coming back and perhaps sharing some of that in a larger group. So that by the end of the session, I often talk about the wisdom in the room, that something will have emerged from the whole event that I would not have planned or predicted at the beginning, because it will be influenced by the people who choose to come and be at that session.
Well, on a personal note, I want to just express how rare it is that I find somebody that has I have total affinity to. Everything you say, I agree with.
That's wonderful, Angelo.
I don't find that often,
I'm so pleased.
and I think that that we're not alone. There are others that feel pretty much the same way about the unity of life and experience it that way. And hopefully, this small gathering we have will multiply that effect.
Yeah, and hopefully more people will come to feel that and feel more connected to others. And I think that's the way we want things to go on this planet, with all the human beings and living beings on it.
Indeed. Well, I will say again that the event, which will you can also see the recording if I'm wise enough to remember how to do one, is called "Integrating Mind and Spirit: A Journey into Consciousness," and it's July 19th, 11 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. Please do the math for your time zone, and I hope you will come and invite maybe your friends to come. And Dr. Joan, it's a delight. Thank you for taking the time today to be on my podcast.
Thank you, Angelo. It's been a pleasure.